This is the story of a mother. I'm reading it on her behalf as she wanted to be here and tell you herself, but she's away on holiday and she couldn't get back in time, so she asked for it to be read out for her today. It's not my story, but I am a mother and it could have been my story. It could be yours. It could be anyone's. Indeed, it's very similar to Jackie's story with her younger son, who sadly couldn't be here today because something special is happening at work today, isn't it? John was a lovely boy when he was little, loving, kind, lively, but polite and well behaved. He enjoyed school and was doing well at everything. Then he had his accident. This is his mother's story in her own words. My name is Wendy Donahue. My son John, who was born in 1965, had an accident hitting his head when he was about 11 years old. Following what I thought was an X-ray, the hospital told me that he had not fractured his skull. His behaviour that day was absolutely terrible, jumping all over the furniture and generally running amok. He kept us up most of the night, and the following day his behaviour had not improved. I took him back to the hospital and demanded that somebody saw him again. Eventually, after threatening to call the police, they took him down to do another X-ray. The next thing I knew, I was taken into a private little room where they told me they'd found a hairline fracture. They said they didn't do proper X-rays of children as it cost too much. They had just done a quick scan, as normally the injuries of kids who had banged their heads was not anything to worry about. But because I had created merry hell on the second visit, they decided to do a proper X-ray, which revealed my son's fractured skull. My son never reverted back to the well-behaved, nice child that he had been, went on to become a real problem child. His schoolwork suffered as his behaviour worsened, and then he started getting into trouble with the police. School were not very helpful. I went up there several times about his behaviour. They eventually got a psychologist to see him, who then informed me that there was nothing wrong with him. They said he did well in classes where he liked the teacher and played up in the classes where he didn't like the teacher. My husband and I were in the pub trade then, and after closing the pub in the evenings, we would go and search for him over the fields where we had found out he used to go. We found out he was sniffing glue. We never knew if we were going to find him dead or alive, and his friends who used to meet him over there would tell us he had not been over there that evening, when in fact he was there and hiding. We would be searching over the fields until the early hours in the morning. He sometimes stayed out for several nights. We took him to the police, hoping it would frighten him enough to come off the glue, but they told us it was nothing to worry about, it wasn't addictive. His non-attendance and truancy led us to having to go to court with John, him being 15 years old and due to leave school in the very near future. The education people told the judge that we, John's parents, had cooperated 100% with them, and that they felt we should not be punished. He was then placed in an IT centre, which he did like, but it was only for a few months, and that finished when he became 16, and we were once again left on our own. We helped him get a Saturday job in MFI, and he did really well, becoming the top boy salesman for a few months. Then John disappeared, and we were unable to find out where he was. We went to the police, but they only said they would just keep an eye out for him as he was well known to them. Eventually one weekend, John came home with a crowd of lads. Apparently he'd been living with fairground people. We asked him to stay, but he said he had to go back and work. Unknown to us, he and his friends had robbed our buckle store at the back of the pub. We called the police, but they advised that we should not push the charges as we would be the only ones charged. He eventually came home to stay, but then one night he stole a lot of my jewellery and broke into the safe and stole money. We had to report it to the police and to the brewery. We almost lost our jobs over it. We had to pay the money back to the brewery ourselves. One policeman did advise us to get John to work with his dad and do everything with him, but unknown to us, he would slip out of the yard and sniff his glue. My husband took him everywhere, but that didn't help. He disappeared again. apparently living in shop doors, etc. When he was 18, his father then said enough is enough, and he didn't want John coming around anymore. John was now apparently on the heavy drugs. He used to turn up early mornings or late at night and stand under my bedroom window, knowing that I would look out and see him. I used to throw food out to him and money, and then he would run off. I can't tell you how that felt. We eventually gave up the pub trade and moved back home to the South End area. John came back with us after his father had relented once again and let him come back into our home. Problems continued. The stealing and the drugs, although he never let us see when he was high. He used to squat in empty buildings with his so-called friends. He believed that they were a better family than us. My husband and I worked weekends when we first came to Southend, and whilst we were away working, John would let his junkie friends into our house and they'd have a bit of a party. Unknown to us, my poor daughter, who used to sit in her bedroom petrified, and wouldn't tell us about it because he would threaten violence to her. His behaviour affected my daughter just as much as us. She and we were always there for him, and he couldn't see how he was abusing us. Over the years, we visited over 21 prisons to see John. We set him up in flats, etc., supplying him with furniture and clothes each time. One of his court cases was held in Derbyshire, and I wrote a letter to the judge explaining that I didn't want to talk about the case, but that he should be aware of John's brain damage. I explained that I had spoken to previous judges asking for help, to no avail. The barrister phoned me after the court case and told me the judge was grateful for my letter and that John would attend a hospital for further tests on his brain. Following this, he finally got diagnosed with brain damage. Everybody prior to this had denied that he had anything wrong with him, and that a bang on the head would not affect a person's behaviour. Now at last they admitted this was the cause. John was fortunate that he was not dyslexic and he didn't have any learning problems. He had always been quite clever and did obtain some GCSEs whilst in Grendon prison for English, maths, etc. But he never got any help when he was released and went back to his bad ways. He met a woman and they started a relationship and eventually had a little girl. This didn't stop him taking his drugs. He left this relationship, which I might add had so many problems, then went back on the streets. I finally cracked when John was in his 30s. I told him it was over. I was not going to be there anymore for him unless he got his act together. We lost contact with him for about 5 years. We didn't know whether he was dead or alive or where he was. About 8 years ago, we moved house, but I made sure we kept our telephone number as it was the only lifeline he would have to contact us. Within a few months, ironically, he phoned me on a Sunday for the first time, crying and begging to see us. We arranged to meet him on the Monday in Basildon. He was clean, so we took him to the council offices and began a long, arduous battle in trying to get him a place to live. We didn't have room for him as we had moved to a granny annex at my daughter's house. He continued in and out of prison, but never had any follow-up once again upon his release, and was again left to his own devices. Unknown to me, he had met Jackie Hewitt-main whilst he was in the last prison, Chelmsford, obviously. He seemed to understand that what she was working for, and I believe this helped him to turn his life around. He is now in a wonderful relationship with a really lovely girl, and they're expecting their baby early next year. He now has regular medication for his brain damage and has become a really lovely, fun-loving and jolly person. I've only written a very small part of the hell I went through, but thank God my husband and I have a strong relationship, otherwise we could have split up so easily with the strain of it all. Brian has been wonderful with me. Even when he wouldn't have anything to do with John, he would still drive me all the way to see him in prison and sit outside in the car. That's how Wendy's letter ends. John was fortunate to be an inmate in HMP for Chelmsford when Jackie Hewitt-main worked there. He saw how her project helped so many prisoners with literacy difficulties and offered to be trained as a mentor to support them. He benefited so much from doing this work for his fellow inmates, and the sense of achievement that went with it, that he has now been out of prison and out of trouble and crime for 4 years. He's not here today because he's embarrassed about all the trouble he caused his family. But he continues to be one of Jackie's fans and is keen to be a part of extending the project so that more prisoners can have the break that he had.